all the men gone? That's the focus of tonight's angle.
Tess Holliday took to Twitter to reveal that she's, quote, anorexic and in recovery.
The ONS data that came out a couple of weeks ago that said for the first time ever since records began, 50.1% of women are childless by 30.
Society. Traditionally, you are meant to worship the ground we walk on. You understand? We're meant to be here, you're meant to be there.
If I get pretty one day, it's over for you bitches.
Show me your bank statements, show me your face, show me your profile. Those are the requirements for you to come for me.
So men are leaving the dating scene in droves. Marriage rates are at the lowest they've ever been. Entitlement is through the roof. Population growth has been falling off of a cliff for the better half of 30 years. And obesity rates are on a steady rise with women leading the charge. So how did we get here? Well, let's start from the beginning. Before Tinder, before OkCupid, before women started going on TikTok and doing these weird makeup transformations that men literally never asked for, and before buying a BBL was as common as buying a car. So contrary to popular belief, marriage was never originally supposed to be about love. Marriage was an agreement between two families to share resources and protection. It was also meant to be a form of peace-seeking. Especially when the debacles between two nations started getting out of hand, marriage was used as an acquisitional truce between the both of them. Marital practices varied across different cultures because it was based on need, population, sex ratios, and just all around practicality. And although monogamy wasn't the OG form of marriage, polyamorous relationships in the form of harems were a luxury of the rich. And monogamy was really only practiced because most commoner men could not afford to have more than one wife. But what sprouted the cultural shift from marrying out of acquisition and practicality to marrying for love? And how did that shift mean or mark the beginning of the end of the nuclear family? Like, what was that historical moment that created such a big ripple in the dynamic between men and women? Well, ironically, it was the Industrial Revolution. Let me explain.
Next door, Tommy Hughes is giving one of the furnaces a drink of hot iron from the 35-ton ladle. This iron is fresh from the blast furnace.
The industrial age was such an important milestone in American history because it sped up the process of bringing America into the future, right? And that came with perks. It came with the ability to not be so dependent on your family for your resources. It allowed men and families just in general to be more independent and break away from them. Because now you didn't have to rely on your family for food, shelter, and security. Now all you needed to do was work a 40-hour week and you could get all those things by yourself. And what it created was a culture of people that married based on happiness, love, and pleasure. Because marriage has always been shaped by the societies that we lived in. And because this new society allowed the freedom to be more independent and to not necessarily marry for the purposes of resources and safety, it allowed people to be a little more selfish. It allowed people to do things because they wanted to do things. It allowed people to move around. They didn't have to stay around their families anymore. But it also meant that marriage went almost overnight from being an investment to being a liability. Because now, for men, the only thing you got out of marriage was love. So the U.S. population growth has been falling off of a cliff for the better half of 30 years, and the average age of an American has been steadily rising. But why? Well, let's just be real. It's women, right? But not all women. It's just most modern women today. Everything's about your butt. Obesity rates are through the roof with women leading it, and there's like 30 different genders now. The average age of a woman losing her virginity went from 22 to 16 and a half. And don't even get me started on body count. And as for this guy, come on, bro. Stop the cap. Now, all jokes aside, after this cultural shift, the marriage rates fell off of a cliff. And a lot of that had to do with World War II. And it was because men were just not there. They were all fighting in the war, or at least the majority of them. And women had to enter the workforce because there just wasn't enough people, right? And after World War II ended in 1945, although the marriage rates were slowly rising, they eventually started tanking again because women wanted more privileges. Now let's fast forward back to modern day. We are in an age where everything is inclusive. Everyone should be able to do everything. And for the most part, that is true. But now we're in a weird dynamic where women are asking for more than what they actually deserve. And men are starting to really get the short end of the deal. And let's take, for example, sports inclusion. I personally, when I was in high school, and I was wrestling, it was like junior year, and there was a rule on my wrestling team that if you got a boner during a match, you would get kicked off the team. And at first I was thinking, like, why would I get a boner wrestling some dude? And I realized it was because there were girls on the boys wrestling team. And, I thought that was weird, but then I was like, okay, whatever. If they want to be on the wrestling team, fine, whatever. But the argument of allowing girls to be in men's sports started becoming a super huge deal for some reason. And no one was talking about the fact that guys weren't allowed in girls' sports, but they were making the argument so big that eventually school districts just let them do it, right? And I'm sure most of you by now know how well that ended.
Male has just become the first transgender person to win a world title in cycling.
First transgender weightlifter winning her maiden international event as a woman.
A biological male winning a gold medal in a women's event now seems a matter of when, not if.
And now the inclusion wasn't fair because men were very easily breaking all of the female records by just pretending or identifying as if they were a woman. And now that type of equality wasn't okay. They wanted equal rights as men, even though they had a lot of privileges, but they also didn't want to be on the draft. They also didn't want to work the same hard jobs. They just wanted the same easy jobs to pay more. And then after that, when TikTok started getting really popular, we started going from butt trend to butt trend to butt trend, and women were making such a huge argument over body count and the fact that they didn't want guys to worry about it. They wanted to be able to be a hoe without being judged. They wanted to free the nipple. They wanted to take stripping as a career. Everyone wanted to be on OnlyFans because they thought they would make money just selling their body. They thought it would be easy money, and we let them do all those things. And mind you, at the same time, housing is becoming increasingly more expensive, especially right after the COVID pandemic, right? After the 2000s, the cost of housing skyrocketed. So on top of marriage no longer being an investment, it was now it was now starting to be out of the reach for the average person to even take care of more than just themselves. And this is one thing that women don't seem to understand, is that a decent majority of men have been dying alone without kids, without being married for decades. Like, before the percentage of women at the age of 30 being childless and husbandless, the percentage of men that were in that same scenario was already at 40%. Like, women went from 35% to 50% in 2 decades. 40% of men in Japan have never even had sex. They're virgins. And now we're in this social dynamic where men have to be all these things. They gotta be tall, they gotta be rich, they gotta be successful, they gotta be all these things on a checklist, and women kind of just have to exist. And they don't seem to understand why men are opting out of dating them. Because the obesity rate has been rising for a very long time, and women, specifically black women, have been leading the fight in obesity. And we add that in with hot girl summer, which is really just a code for I'm gonna go down to Miami and get passed around like a blunt. And then also add in the fact that now in a lot of movies, actually the majority of movies, men are portrayed as these androgynistic homosexual beings that are always need to be saved by women, or they're acting in some feminine manner. And going even further, a lot of women are starting to look like this. And by the way, if you guys never seen this episode of Cuts, this woman literally admitted that some of her body count was due to prostitution. And we're supposed to believe that this is marriage material.
Yes. Yes, okay. Yes. Yes. Yes, okay. Yes.
Now I'm going to be real with you guys. This problem is probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I think it's because just the sheer number of women that have an issue with introspectively looking at themselves and asking the question, what am I actually doing wrong? Right? They're spending way too much time in this bubble or fantasy world that they can do no wrong, right? Like there's always going to be a guy that wants them. Guys try to sleep with me all the time, so I have nothing to worry about. I don't need a man. They love saying they don't need a man until they're cold at night. And I'm just going to be honest, like some of you women might want to get a really good winter jacket because it is going to be a very cold cuffing season for some of you. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will be posting as often as I can. But until then, peace.